Dylan, can we get about 20 boxes of Kleenex and just pass them around, please? That's, whew. All right, but that's only the beginning. That incredible movie that we just watched is only the beginning because we've got a panel of very special guests. I'd like to bring back Tim Keitt, Professor Tim Keitt. Come on up to the stage. Callen, Inman. Come on back up to the stage. Callen, come on up to the stage. And then we got Jules Maron, who is one of these heroic people who does exactly that, wildlife rescue, and she's going to go to the stage too. Come on up, everybody. All right, here comes Jules. All right, now we got the whole gang's here. Now, before we get started with our discussion, tell me a little bit about what you do for a living, Tim.
Well, I'm a professor at UT Austin, and I teach a biology of birds class, which is a lot of fun because I've been a bird watcher most of my life and enjoy taking the students out in the field and teaching them field ID, and then we do a lot of evolutionary biology as well in the class. My lab we do a fair bit of computational mathematical work as well.
Yeah, when it comes computational mathematical work about?
Yeah, we are very interested in the impacts of climate change on populations of plants and animals. We do a fair bit of bird work, but we're pretty broad in that. And so currently the communities of organisms living in the spaces are kind of wedged in between all of our activities, and so they're in these very complicated landscapes that are changing and being disturbed, but they're also subject to this effect, this large-scale effect of climate change. So we're trying to unravel some of the ways in which that
turns out that's a real thing, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Callen, tell me a little bit about your studies and what you're doing. And you're at the beginning of a great career, I believe, since you're still in school.
Yeah, so I actually study fish, which I won't really talk about here, but I study ecology and evolution of behavior in a family of live-bearing fish. It's very common throughout the Americas. I have one bird study that I am working on, my first bird study, so that's exciting. And I do a lot of bird watching in my free time. I actually worked on some bird projects before grad school, decided they were very challenging, and so I'd like to switch to something a little bit more tractable for the kinds of questions I wanted to ask. So yeah, I primarily work in fish, but also spend a lot of time watching birds.
Sure. So you're a bird watcher by avocation, rather than study.
Yeah. But I like to think it's informed by some of the background I've gotten in grad school. So
sure, absolutely. And Jules, what do you do? You're the one who's not actually in a classroom and doing all this stuff. You're out here every day, going around, and tell us about what you're doing.
Yeah, so we over at Austin Wildlife Rescue, we take in almost 10,000 animals a year, and it's a major operation, and we field probably about 20,000 phone calls a year as well, just trying to talk people through things, and we take in all native Texas wildlife, and our whole goal is to rehabilitate and release into the wild, like we saw here. So. We take in everything, including hummingbirds. So we take in over 300 species of animals across Texas. So Texas has a very diverse environment, which means we have a lot of diversity within the species. And it's a lot of homework every day to try to learn about all of these species. Sometimes we get things in we haven't seen before. And we got our first salamander in, I think, a few years ago, and it was like, what do we do with this?
Yeah. Just buy car insurance? Yeah.
Yeah.
But sort of, I'm watching Terry, and I'm just verklempt with admiration for her. So, what kind of person actually gets into wildlife rescue?
Insane. No, okay. No, I think it's something that a lot of people kind of fall into. And it's very addictive in and of itself because there is something so magical with watching what you think might be a hopeless case. And it's also really magical too, just watching how many kind people there are that actually bring these animals in. And like we saw in the film, I mean, we see that every single day because everybody brings these animals to us. So seeing that level of care and then watching something that just looks completely obliterated, right? We get a lot of car hits, things like that. And this animal can look like it's literally dying. And to be able to get our hands on it, and our veterinarian, who's here, by the way, Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews.
Yes, thank you. And to be able to just do some incredible, miraculous work, really, to watch them recover, because these are animals that don't want to be around us. So when we're there trying to comfort them, they don't want to be touched. They're so scared of us. And so we try to give them their space, but we also have to get our hands on them to help them recover. And being able to take them from that point to the point where they're running off into the wild, it never gets old.
Yeah, that's incredible. You're incredible people. Presumably, and I was going to get to this later, but presumably there are opportunities for volunteers. There are opportunities for, you might even accept donations, right? Correct?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. At
Yeah,
Austin
we are
Wildlife Rescue,
100% donation based. So,
Yeah.
Of course, we never charge anybody bringing
Yeah.
animals in or
Yeah.
anything. And yes, always in need of volunteers. We actually just opened up for volunteers. We have enough babies now in to where we can have those folks come in and help us with those feedings, because there is just nothing cuter than a little baby possum or little tiny naked birds.
Absolutely, yeah. So you remember that feeling when you watch cactus fly away at the end? Just think about that feeling when you go to the website and you make a donation, a generous donation to Austin Wildlife Rescue. So Tim, I wanted to ask you, because we're watching so many shots, and I'm going to get to some audience questions too. We're seeing those incredible slow motion shots of hummingbirds, and their heads are like gyroscopically, completely seeming to be level, while the rest of them is going, a mile a minute. How do they do that? How do they manage that sort of stability? Is there something inside there that's making that possible?
Yeah, it's truly remarkable. I was noticing that as well, so obviously they have very highly developed neurological systems and are able to. They truly are the most amazing kind of acrobats, and you can imagine. And I don't know the specific neural pathway, but they have remarkable ability to. Obviously, they need to keep their eyes stable to see things while they're hovering and so on.
But this is all happening in their brains.
Yeah.
The sort of management of like this, I need to make my wings go this fast in order to remain perfectly level at the stamen of this flower or whatever.
Yeah. So obviously, as he was seeing, they do go through a developmental process, and they learn, and they gradually gain the full adult competence. But a lot of that is innate in the parts of the brain that just handle basic balance and orientation in ways that and partly that's just built into them.
Yeah, that's miraculous. Were they evolved from some other? Do we have an understanding of like what common ancestors they may have had, or were there dinosaur hummingbirds?
That's a great question. We don't have any fossils of dinosaur hummingbirds that we have found yet, but it'll be interesting. They're quite diverse group of birds, and in Ecuador, I think they have 85 species of hummingbirds, and it's just kind of incredible if you ever get a chance to go to those places, because you can see huge numbers of different kinds of hummingbirds. And they are very highly derived in the sense of like modified from other kinds of birds. But they're in this big, very diverse group of birds that have radiated, mostly sort of in step with the flowering plants, right? Yeah. So this huge mutualism between birds and plants that has occurred most dramatically in the tropics, where the diversity is super high.
Well, here, I'll ask our resident bird watcher here, Callen. So, how many different species of hummingbirds would you say are around Austin, and are there things we can do to welcome them to our yards, for instance?
So there are two species that breed in the area: black-chinned and ruby-throated hummingbirds. Primarily, we have black-chinned breeding here. We have a few other species that you see occasionally wintering or or in migration. Black-chinned hummingbirds, in my experience, they really like these kind of pristine juniper oak habitats where you see golden-cheeked warblers. And right about this time, they're all coming in force and establishing territories for breeding. And if you go to any of these places that are a bit wilder, you'll see a hummingbird perched on like every third juniper, just like at the very top, just a little speck. And they'll do these very acrobatic, like aerial displays as both kind of a territorial defense, like against other hummingbirds, and also to attract mates. It's very interesting. But as for attracting them to your yard, they really like red-colored flowers. Those red-colored flowers evolved with birds because red is very salient to bird vision. I think So there are things like tropical sage is a really popular thing for hummingbirds. As we saw in the video, hummingbirds actually eat a lot of insects and spiders and other invertebrates. So they're both getting nectar, and they're also gleaning invertebrates off vegetation and off the flowers and stuff. Any native wildflowers, and especially red ones.
I'm terrified of bees. But hummingbirds seem pretty cool with bees. That surprised me.
Yeah.
Bees don't sting hummingbirds?
Sometimes.
I mean, they will drive them away from a hummingbird feeder.
Sure.
So
okay.
if you don't control the bees, they
Gotta
will
control
take
those
over.
bees.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely control those bees. So the other thing that blew me away in this, and again, I'm impersonating a layman who doesn't know much about science, so bear with me, is when Terry says, like, that's not sleep, that's unconscious. So these hummingbirds, they don't sleep?
They certainly do sleep, but they're actually quite interesting in that they burn so much energy. They're so small, and I think it's almost hard for us to even appreciate that. Like if you ever hold a hummingbird in your hand, its heart buzzes. You feel this, it's like 150, 200 heartbeats a second, right? So it's like a buzz, and they burn so much energy, they cannot survive the night. There's no way that they could live through the night. So they lower their body temperature. They go into torpor at night, and they reduce their body temperature, reduce their metabolic rate, and then bring their body temperature back up in the morning. And so during that time, they're not in a coma or anything. They're regulating their body temperature, but they just change the thermostat to maintain their so they can survive through the night, especially in montane environments. Hummingbirds go up to very high elevations and can be quite cold. And so, that's a remarkable adaptation. It also occurs in some other birds like nightjars and things like that, the caprimulgids.
And when they sleep, are they more subject to being preyed upon by their predators, natural and otherwise?
Well, I think there's recently a discovery of hummingbirds, I think, undergoing torpor in a cave in Ecuador at a super high elevation. They might seek out a really secluded spot where there are really no natural predators around.
And everybody always says that cats are like this incredible factor in the lives of birds and all kinds of birds. Is that true of hummingbirds as well?
Yeah, I've seen cats catch hummingbirds on the wing. They'll jump up and just grab them out of the air. Cats are, because they normally predator populations are in check with their prey populations, but cats have this food subsidy, so when the prey is gone, it doesn't matter to them. They just go and eat their cat food. So unfortunately, that means that they kill quite a few birds, outdoor cats.
Jules, having watched this film, are you now armed with more information about what to do about hummingbirds when somebody brings a hummingbird in? And has anybody brought a hummingbird in?
Oh yeah, we get a lot of hummingbirds every year. So a lot. We get about 30 to 40 every year. I think we get about 2,600 songbirds a year, and so about 30 of those are the. I know the numbers are so big. About 30 or so. Of the hummingbirds, and it's interesting because a lot of people don't realize how much protein an insect they need, especially as babies. And so like sugar water alone is just not enough, when people are trying to feed them, especially as babies. So we actually do get little fruitless fruit flies. What is the word? Flightless fruit flies to put in their little enclosures and stuff. And I loved her little water dishes she had with the pebbles in there. So yeah, definitely had some more ideas on that one. And it's funny, I think we mostly get the black-chinned hummingbirds coming in and a few of the ruby-throated. But when they come in, the most common things that we see that have happened are attacks from other songbirds. Where, because I think they put on such aerial displays that sometimes you'll get that mockingbird or blue jay, I think are the most common ones that we hear about, and they'll kind of body slam them down. And then the other big thing are spider webs. So I think at the beginning of here we saw her kind of peeling off a spider web, and as much as they use spider webs for their nests, sometimes things just don't work out well. They get spun up in those spider webs, and that is a painstaking process to get that off of them.
Yeah, because they're so tiny. The spider web is a real obstacle if you get tied up in it.
Yeah.
I wonder if we have any questions or comments, or I'll call them contributions from our audience, observations even, if anybody's got anything they'd like to bring up or even ask our expert panel. I see a hand right over here. I didn't quite hear you. Oh, what kind of relationship? Mutualist relationship with humans. Are birds the only species that can have a mutualist? You're teaching me a new word here.
So in evolutionary biology, we talk a lot about mutualisms and ecology, and there is a clear coevolutionary relationship between hummingbirds and flowering plants, right? So to the extent that some flowering plants have adaptations to be very exclusive to one species of hummingbirds so that they have more reliable transmission of their pollen instead of being spread across many species, if they can sort of trap that bird evolutionarily, in a sense, to be obligate to that flower, then it's going to only visit the same species, and then the pollen it's carrying will be more efficiently transferred. Whereas there's quite a lot of variation there, and some hummingbirds visit all kinds of different species, and some are very specialist, and the same thing with the plants. But we see those kinds of mutualisms ubiquitously in nature throughout the tree of life, from fungi to primates and everything. So there's a lot going on there. But it's always very complicated and sort of a little twisted. Most mutualisms are a gradient between exploitation and cooperation. And it's facultative often, that depending on the context, it'll switch.
Maybe we have another question or two. See how I pretended not to know what mutualism was? That was funny. Right over here, yeah. I'll repeat.
Without our pollinating, species and flowers and things for them.
Sure, I'll repeat the question for those who didn't hear, which is what's going on with the counts of hummingbirds, especially due to the situation with the recent drought.
I haven't heard anything about hummingbirds specifically. I mean, some of the plants they're reliant on, I notice, are some of the ones that are least susceptible, are the most drought tolerant. So in the fall, we have large numbers of both ruby-throated and black-chinned hummingbirds that pass through, and Turk's cap is often one of the only flowers that's blooming even when it's extremely dry in the fall. And so I think in some ways they'll specialize on resources that are highly reliable. But that is an interesting question. I haven't heard of hummingbirds in particular being affected. Theoretically, these droughts should affect bird populations, because as we've seen with this year, for example, a lot of flowering plants are very delayed, and so that means like the emergence and timing Insects is very delayed, and a lot of, especially with migratory birds, they're, the sort of the time when they arrive and when they're establishing territories often coincides with, these big resource pulses, right? So so there definitely should be negative consequences, but I haven't heard about that for hummingbirds.
I don't know specifically right now, like at this time, but Audubon's analysis of their Christmas bird count data over 100 years or more shows drought to be very impactful.
Just how far would the migrational sort of habitat be of some of these hummingbirds? How wide would that be? Do they move between states?
I think for these specific hummingbird species, ruby-throated hummingbirds winter as far south as Central America, and they might breed as far north as northern Canada. And then black-chinned are primarily in the western U.S. and northern Mexico, and then they winter in Mexico mostly. Yeah.
So an individual hummingbird that we see in our yards may have been all as far as up as Canada and as far down as Central America?
Yeah, potentially.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long flight, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And what?
And they cross the Gulf.
Yes.
Yeah,
They
that's
crossed
right.
the Gulf of America. Yes. Did you get that on camera? Maybe we won't lose all our funding. I hope we have at least a couple more of these wonderful questions. Yeah, right over here.
Do we know why the throat and chin is differentiated between species?
Do we know why the throat and chin are differentiated among these species? What made that possible or happen?
There's a, they definitely have tracts of feathers, and there's sort of characteristic patches on birds that tend to be different. But the sort of more complicated answer is that it turns out that very few genes can control major plumage coloration, and so people who have studied certain warblers that are quite similar and that interbreed a lot, they find so little genetic variation between the species that they're almost unrecognizable as independent species. But if you look carefully enough, you'll find certain genes that turn the throat black versus yellow, and then that social recognition of species is what keeps them separate as species. So it's pretty interesting.
Gotcha. I see a couple of hands right over here. Yeah.
If somebody wanted to attract the hummingbirds to their yards, what particular plants should they be planting?
We covered this a little bit. Which particular plants, though, should we be planting? We didn't get an answer. We got an answer that bright tropical plants, but tell us some particular plants that you should go out to the Natural Gardener, where my girlfriend works, and buy.
My yard, they love the salvia.
Yeah.
And the Russian sage as well for the purple flowers too. They seem to like that a lot, is what I've seen.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I forget all the names, like the little red firecracker plant, and then we have some yuccas that have big stalk of red flowers in the yard, and that's really popular with the.
They're all about equally nutritious. They all, yeah.
I don't know really.
Yeah, okay. If you don't know, I sure don't know.
There's some interesting stuff going on in the chemicals in those, and they're discovering more and more, but in the nectar. But yeah, don't know a lot.
It's funny you mentioned I don't know, and that's an interesting thing that comes up in the film is that Terry says like we don't even know how these wings work, which is like that's mind blowing to me. Is that true that we don't quite know how these wings even work?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has been some pretty interesting research on biomechanics of hummingbird flight, and I think it's reasonably well understood, but it does seem magical. It's so fast.
Yeah, sure. Even you, a hardened scientist, you can be blown away by the magic of these little creatures.
Well, and they're so hard to fix too. So not only is there some mystery on how those wings work, but they're so difficult to fix. So like we saw in here when the hummingbird cactus with the shoulder girdle issue.
Yeah, right.
And, in that case, you're really waiting for that muscle heal to happen and try to just get that back. And, at our place when we're doing x-rays for hummingbirds, it's really difficult because they're so tiny that it's even hard to get a clear x-ray read on that. So that's one of the things we were talking about maybe trying to get a dental x-ray at some point, try to get a tinier x-rays going on, because it's hard to even actually see what is happening to them.
And if you're feeling around in there, you're worried that you're going to even break a bone, probably.
Yeah, it's like, whoops, well, it's broken now. No, okay. Just kidding.
You can laugh about. I'm going to have nightmares about it. I see a hand from our doctor over here.
I just wanted to, like, there's so much about medicine and rehabilitation in these species that is reactive, right? We don't get to have all the data that we would like to have. And so she's like, well, we don't know what's going on with that shoulder. And so there's so much of rehab and things like that if you don't have a dental x-ray, you don't have the right anesthetic equipment. And honestly, anesthesia in a 2-gram bird is not necessarily a great idea.
Right.
So there's so much of this that is just us providing the support we can to allow their bodies to do what they're able to do. So it's when we get to these smaller creatures, I think that this has been something I've learned working with AWR, is that you feel like your hands are tied in a lot of ways because you don't get to have those answers and you don't get to do to actually fix it. All you can do is support them. And so I don't know. I think it's less about us not knowing how the wings work and not being able to gather the data to say what this specific problem is.
Sure, yeah. The diagnostic tools are just not there for it, yeah.
And I think that's where the imagination comes from, too, and the creativity, because so much of wildlife work is imagination and creativity and trying to figure out how to do weird splints for weird animals.
Yeah, sure.
And so I thought that quote was so beautiful that they talked about from Einstein about how much of it is imagination.
Imagination is
Yeah.
more important than knowledge.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to carry that. So tell me this. Actually, Jules, it's been one of the things that almost seems a little metaphysical is that we hear Terry saying that, like, you can see it if they got the fight in them, if they're going to live. Sort of that sort of triage that you do at that point. I would imagine that's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, so I've been doing this for about 8 years, so not nearly as long, but it is at the point where you see enough to be able to read that species. And I think squirrels, which I know we're not talking about right now, but they're a great example where they can come in with the exact same injury. And there's one squirrel that's, dragging itself around, and he's like, whoa, nothing to see here, I'm fine,
Right.
And he's still trying to fight along. You'll get another squirrel with the exact same injury, and it's just laying there and actively dying.
Yeah, and there's not much you can do at that point, generally.
Right.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Let's get another question or two, or contribution or two. I see a hand right here.
What is in the big syringes that she was feeding them?
It looks like what we use, which is called Nectar Plus. And so, you mix it with warm water and put it in the syringes. We actually paint the tips of ours red. I guess we don't need to do that, but we go the extra mile with different colors to put on the ends of our syringes to attract them like they're flowers. But it's really simple. It's just a powder, and it's called Nectar Plus. For our little ones, like the little tiny babies that come in, which are really scary to feed because it's like feeding an ant. We actually have to mix that with a lorikeet powder because it's higher in protein. So that way we're able to give them a little bit of a higher protein liquid diet along with those little fruit flies and stuff. So, but also that 1 to 4 sugar to water works great, for out in your yard and everything. For us, we're doing a little more oomph because we're dealing with babies or injured hummingbirds.
Excellent. Before we wrap it up, I wanted to hear a little bit more about what's going on among these kinds of populations, not necessarily just hummingbirds, but among bird populations that we're seeing as an effect of man-made climate change. What kinds of things are happening that would curl our hair? No offense.
So I would say it's very multifaceted, multi-causal. So climate change is very important, and we're seeing tropicalization, and this is one of the things that we study is the species that are moving northward in Texas. In particular, we've been looking at green jays, which you may know from South Texas. They used to be fairly restricted in South Texas and now up around San Antonio. And so we've been very interested in west to Del Rio. And so we've been banding and getting blood from them for genetics. And so we're really interested in that process. So the warming and most likely the lessening of harsh winter weather, even though we have these cold snaps, we're generally much warmer overnight in the wintertime, and so that's probably allowing them to move northward. And so lots of species are moving into Texas that were considered mainly tropical origin Mexican species. So we're seeing movement of lots of different kinds of organisms in response to changing climate because they're tracking the environmental conditions that where they can survive. But in terms of the sort of multiple effects, so building strikes, disruption by light at night during migration, cat predation, loss of habitat is sort of the main thing. The estimates are about 1 in 4 birds that used to be here 50 years ago are now, we've seen that much decline. And this seems worldwide. We now, there's been a few people working long-term in, say, in the Amazon basin, which seems it shouldn't be affected, but the length and duration of droughts there now are causing, and that recently it's been tied directly to decline in populations of primarily understory birds like antbirds and things that and so all over the world we're seeing these quite strong impacts, and so there's a lot to be concerned about in terms of the conservation of bird populations.
If there were one, if there were one button that could be pushed that could stop climate change in its tracks, would we still be undergoing this sort of tropicalization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for example, we see a general pattern and we make the hypothesis, but it's not necessarily easy to prove that there's a direct causal linkage. Like, for example, these jays also like to eat corn, and people feed deer corn, and so they may be getting food resources, and those may be interacting. So I can't say for sure, but I suspect. I mean, the pattern is so broad and so general, and even when we were talking, I mean, a few years ago, I was talking with the people that were doing this study in Ecuador, and they had shown declines, and we were just like, just talking about it and going, well, it's got to be something very systemic. And then last year it came out that this drought pattern seems to be the linkage there. And so when you see these really common broad patterns, we have a very good understanding that it is the change in the temperatures that is causing a lot of this northward upslope migration in the mountains, northward movement of species.
It seems likely this is just going to be the way it is because I don't know if our political leaders are wildly interested in dialing back climate change. So I think here we are, a lot of fun new species, at least, if we look on the bright side, for us to bird watch. So I do want to say, before we close this down, because it is 4 a.m, as promised, Jules, a lot of people here are probably exactly the kinds of people who would love to volunteer for you, or at the very least write a check. What do they do? How do they reach you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So for volunteering, we've actually opened that up and are now starting online orientations. So if you go to our website on austinwildliferescue.org and go under the Support Us section there, you'll see how to volunteer. You just click on a link, or you can also just call us as well, which will also be on our website. And you can donate online. You can send in a check. I can run your credit card tonight.
The thing is, I'm sure you're actually not kidding.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. So look for Jules. Look for Jules in the lobby. and then Callen and Tim. So any exciting projects that you two are working on that might be relevant to our audience of mutualists?
Well, so the other thing that we've been doing a lot with is using AI to classify soundscapes and bird calls and
Okay.
other kinds of sounds in the environment. So that's been really interesting, and it's taken a lot of time. I spend a lot of time these days programming little computers that we put in the field that have microphones on them and run these AI kernels. So that's been fun because we really need this increasing amount of data that's sort of continuous, collected continuously in ways that we can't do ourselves in the field because of this rapid change that's occurring. So we'll be better able to track and hopefully mitigate some of those impacts.
And Callen, we're looking every day for incredible documentaries about really cute fish, so we can have you again as a guest. But anything else that you're working on that everybody here would be excited about, an exciting project?
Yeah, well, I mean, I am working on a single bird project, and not to completely give it away to anyone, but essentially there's this very prominent hypothesis in evolutionary biology called the social brain hypothesis, which is that as animals get more social, their brains get larger, and there are all these great cognitive benefits. But I'm actually testing the idea that sociality leads to stupidity. Across birds, that perhaps there are reductions in brain size and reductions in cognitive abilities because individuals are able to offload the cost of learning onto other individuals in the group, and so maybe not have to learn as much by themselves individually.
Oh man, I think we've got
something humans do as well.
We've got a huge. There's a huge mass experiment going on right now that you can draw a lot of data from. Thank you all for being here, and I want to thank Tim Keitt, Jules Maron, and Callen Inman for joining us. Thank you all. This has been so much fun. We'll hope to see you all again many more times. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for the invitation.